My name is Jeff Morgan. I am from Dallas, Texas. I want to speak on the issue of hunting fathers. Hunting fathers. In 1932, there was a movie put out. It was called The Most Dangerous Game. And The Most Dangerous Game was talking about hunting a man. There have been a number of movies that have come out since then, maybe a dozen or more than that, who knows, but talking about the sport of hunting human beings. And we're not talking about hunting them with paintballs. We're talking about hunting them to kill them. And there are movies that talk about even a person wanting to raise money for himself, to take care of his child's medical needs. In order to raise money, he allowed himself to be hunted by other humans. He would make so much per hour, and I think if he survived the whole 24 hours, I think he'd get paid like $24.5 million. But the whole idea was about we are hunting a man to kill him. And currently what we have right now in the state of Texas and in other states, it appears to be more and more universal, is that hunting men, in particular hunting fathers, is now considered okay. Just recently up in Idaho, there was an individual that was on trial. His name was James Brashear. He was the father-in-law to John Mast. The father-in-law to John Mast, he intentionally shot and killed him at a child custody exchange. Now the charges in front of Mr. Brashear's were murder one. My understanding of murder one would have been that had he been convicted, he would have been in jail for life, 30 years to life, and he would not have been able to see his family. That would have probably have been the just course to take, being as the people that John was either a brother or a son to can no longer see their brother or their son, or in the case of the children, their father. That probably would have been the just punishment to mete out. Murder two would have been to put him in jail. I think it was 30 years to life. And again, I may be incorrect on some of these things, but he would have been able to talk with his own family. Mr. Brashear was going to plead to murder two. The third alternative before the jury was voluntary manslaughter. And that's what they convicted him of. That can be 0 to 15 years. It can be a fine up to $15,000. It can be both. What happened in his case with John Mast is that the attorneys for Mr. Brashear were able to convince the jury somehow that perhaps Mr. Brashear's former son-in-law was a dangerous person. Now, John Mast had gone through trials. He had been exonerated from all of the charges that were falsely leveled against him. Silver bullet charges. Silver bullet is deadly. Sometimes it leads to the death of a person. And the silver bullet charge was lodged by his ex-wife against John to keep him away from the children. I didn't get to watch the entire trial, but I've talked with other people that have been there in person, watched the entire thing, or remotely. The court records were clear. Mr. James Brashear premeditatedly murdered John Mast. It was a premeditated murder, and yet the jury gave him voluntary manslaughter. Now, one person talked with one of the jurors afterwards and sent him some clippings basically stating that John had been exonerated, that nothing that John had done was found to be true, and he said had the jury known this fact, it's likely they would have convicted Mr. Brashear of murder two instead of voluntary manslaughter. But here's a man, once again, Mr. James Brashear. He's in jail right now. He'll be sentenced in November. He's in there for voluntary manslaughter, even though he premeditatedly killed a father who loved his children, who fought for his children, who did everything he could to be in his children's life, who experienced a silver bullet by his ex-wife, and now is dead. His parents, his brothers, his sisters, his relatives no longer have John living. His children no longer have a father. But this is the type of a world that we live in right now. We're hunting fathers. It's considered acceptable, morally acceptable. We allow this. Chad Reed was trying to pick up his son out in Lubbock, Texas. Kyle Carruth shot and killed him. Yes, the grand jury did not indict him. Kyle Carruth did not murder him. He was merely protecting his property, stuff like that. It was garbage, in my opinion. I've seen the video clip. The video clip is out there. And the state of Texas would do nothing against him. Recently, I believe it was last year, there was another person, Tyrone Darling, was going to see one of his children. And when Tyrone was with his child, he was shot and killed. Just as of a couple of days ago, the Arlington grand jury decided not to indict the person who shot and killed Tyrone Darling. These are men from various walks of life, black men, white men, men who have been through divorce, men who have wanted to see their children and they've not been married to the mother. But it does not make a difference. Right now, it appears to be that men are being hunted. And when I say men, let me clarify that even further. Fathers. It is fair game to have a hunt against fathers, especially when they want to see their children. This to me also is a little bit personal as well. I've been threatened to be killed several different times by one person that I was dating after a divorce. She threatened to kill me. She threatened to burn down my house. She threatened to shoot me, all sorts of things. The police came to my house, kicked me out of my house. I had to leave my house. My former father-in-law, who was a Christian missionary and a pastor, wished that he could go back and take me out. My ex-wife's new husband, also a pastor, who is now a defrocked pastor, threatened to take me out. I've had these people threaten me as well. So even though I don't think that the people that threatened me could have done it, what we have right now is a landscape throughout our country and throughout Texas that says it's okay for people to shoot and kill fathers of children. All you have to do is use the silver bullet technique. Claim that I was afraid of the father. I believe it was last year, I went down to testify in front of the Juvenile Justice and Family Issues Committee, in front of, they were talking about about protective orders and how it should be easier for women to get protective orders. And it turned out that I just said protective orders are handed out like candy, to which Victoria Niave, who at that time was the chair of the committee, said, "Mr. Morgan, they are not." Well, I've experienced a protective order. At least they tried to put a protective order on me. I had to pay $20,000 between two different trials, and the judge said there is absolutely no evidence. You didn't do anything. Thought I was a good father, also thought that the opposing side was lying and committing perjury. No punishment for perjuries. I have to pay the bills. They just get to go down there and accuse me and try to ruin my life and put me in jail. The idea of the fathers on hunt right now, fathers being prey to be hunted, either by an ex-wife, by a girlfriend, by a person's father, a woman's father, by a woman's new boyfriend, as what happened with Chad Reed when Kyle Carruth killed him. This is something that's going on, and it's something that I think we need to talk about. We need to start declaring that fathers have rights. One of the issues that takes place in the state of Texas in particular is we do not have a presumption of equal shared parenting. If there is a divorce that takes place, if there is a child that is born out of wedlock, the automatic presumption is, in almost every single instance, the mother gets custody. The father becomes a wallet and he gets to visit his children. This is a very perverse law. A father and a mother together combine their DNA 50-50 to create a child. That by nature, by biology, we should know that at least that every child is the product of two people, each contributing to it. And yet in our child custody, whatever this is supposed to mean, in our child custody, we often make one parent the primary custodian and the other parent the visiting parent, who has the responsibility of paying child support. This past session, it was in April, I was speaking on a bill because one representative that I was speaking in front of wanted to have a bill in which fathers would automatically be made to pay child support from conception. Now, when I responded, I said I think that we should be looking at things to create marriage. Marriage is the best situation for children. The idea of single parent households, single mom households, incentivizing such things should be struck down, should not be taking place, and that this representative, who claims to be a conservative Christian Republican, said, well, what happens if the mother says that he's abusive? What happens if she suffers some type of abuse? So even this representative, who also previously had pledged to me, I am in your camp, I'm speaking for fathers, I'm advocating for fathers, yet he, from my perspective, he lied to me. He did not keep his promise, and he had to use the whole the whole idea that, well, what happens if the person is an abusive father? And there are some cases where there's an abusive father. There are also a lot of cases where there are abusive mothers, that there are bitter, vengeful ex-wives or girlfriends. And it can also go the other way. There can be bitter, vengeful ex-husbands or boyfriends. However, what's happening right now in the state of Texas and throughout the country is that these individuals, without any proof, whether they're bitter, whether they're somebody who's going to put somebody in danger or nothing like that, they are automatically assumed to be guilty of being a perpetrator of violence or some type of sexual molestation. All you have to do is make the accusation in most states, and particularly in Texas, and you will win your case. By the way, Victoria Niave, you need to look at this a little bit further. I realize you maybe were a puppet of Dade Phelan, but you need to look at this a little bit further, because this is what happens. We even had an assistant district attorney, Leslie Levy, out of Williamson County. I believe she is now in Austin, but she gave a whole seminar to attorneys on how to use protective orders against men to gain an advantage in divorce. And she said, don't go through my office, there's criminal charges here, but you can use these things to gain leverage. In other words, you can commit perjury, you can lie. You can do anything you want to help out your client, your female client, to get a better deal, a better settlement in divorce. Again, right now in our state and throughout the states, and as evidence in the case of John Mast, it is open season on fathers. And you know what? You don't even need to have a hunting permit. All you have to do is make a claim that, well, I felt that he was danger. I felt this. Your feelings, your misinformed feelings in many instances, is all the permission that you need to get a license. When you go hunting deer or something like that, you have to buy a license. If you go out fishing, you have to buy a license. If you don't have a license, you could be charged with unlawful hunting, unlawful fishing, whatever the penalty for that is. It is open season on fathers, not just in Texas, but throughout the country. What happened in the case of John Mast up in Idaho was simply horrendous. You had a law firm that intentionally tried to skew what was taking place in order to let a murderer get a charge of voluntary manslaughter. Once again, he was trying to plead the murder too, the lesser of two murder counts. The jury gave him voluntary manslaughter because the lawyer or the law firm was able to convince the individuals of the jury that perhaps the father was a danger. We need to get rid of this narrative. We need to start addressing the issue of false allegations. We need to start addressing the issue of perjury. Currently in the state of Texas, perjury goes unpunished by and large. It's very interesting because somebody testified in front of a civil jurisprudence committee, and one of the representatives there told the person who was testifying, well, you may be committing perjury. You said you were down here for such and such a purpose, but you're here to serve Chairman Leach. That would be perjury. It's interesting how he invoked perjury because a person went in front of a committee to give a testimony, or at least to sign up for a testimony to serve Chairman Leach. That was perjury, and yet we have perjury committed all the time in these courts, and nothing takes place. In fact, I had one person, an attorney, respected attorney, who was going to run for judge, who did run for judge at one time, and he said, do you really want us to prosecute perjury? We could be going after people that are raping little children. Well, it's not an either or. And of course he takes the most extreme situation and says, well, there are men out there and they're raping little children and we only have so many resources. But what he's saying is perjury is okay in the state of Texas. Perjury in the state of Texas seldom gets punished, seldom even gets acknowledged as being a crime. And perjury is leading to the death, the shooting, the open season, hunting on fathers trying to be in their children's lives. Fathers, at this point in time, I don't know what to tell you. I think at child custody exchanges, you need to consider wearing a bulletproof vest, because right now it is open season on you. Fathers, I think you need to take other people with you to videotape what's going on, so that if you do get murdered, that maybe the other person could be charged with murder. Fathers, I think you need to be also keeping a record of all of your correspondence, so that when they say, well, I'm just trying to protect my children against you, that you would have a long track record of being a good father, not an abusive father. If you are on a grand jury, you need to no longer take the presumption that, oh, you know what, they're just trying to protect the children and the mother because they're fearful. This is a technique that many people are using. Can happen both by mothers and fathers, predominantly more by mothers, because predominantly mothers are the custodial parent. But we need to fix this problem. I would like to ask our legislators, and particularly Representative Leach, you've made some promises to me in the past. Again, I feel like you did not keep your promises to me. I have text messages and other things I could go back and talk with you about. I could display them publicly. But you have not kept your promises, and here you are, the chairperson of the civil jurisprudence. You know these things have taken place, and you are the one that also decided, well, what happens if a mother is in an abusive relationship? I don't know how much more abusive you can get, Representative Leach, than having a father killed, a good father killed at a child custody exchange. For those people who say, well, you don't know who John Mast was, that is true. I'd never met John Mast, but I'd meet his family. His family is one of the best families you would ever meet. I have no reason to think, none whatsoever, that John would be otherwise. And in fact, the other people that have met him and have correspondence with him know that he was an outstanding father. And in fact, he was exonerated from all of his charges. This was strict collusion between his ex-wife and her father to kill the father of the children, and he got off with voluntary manslaughter. For me, this is a little bit personal. I did not experience it the same way that John did. I'm still here. But I've had 3 people at least threaten to kill me. And I think that this is a pretty awful state of affairs, that when we assume that a woman can never lie, a woman will never lie, and a father will always lie. A woman always needs to be protected, even when she's manipulating a system that even ADA, Leslie Levy, Assistant District Attorney, works for the government of Texas, was counseling lawyers on how to use this system to make sure that women gain an advantage in divorce and in custody situations. When this takes place, we have a real problem in Texas, and we have a real problem throughout our country. We need to be fixing this issue. We need to make sure that fathers are no longer hunted. And I guess that's really all I have to say. It is a shame. I never in my life would have envisioned a state or a country that would allow open hunting season on fathers. We need to change it. And by the way, we'll say that maybe you're a mother right now. You're trying to gain custody, or you're trying to gain some type of revenge against a father. This may happen to your son someday. Grandparents, this may happen to your grandchildren. Anybody who does this stuff is an abusive person. And if you actually pull the trigger, you are a murderer, in my opinion. That's it. Thank you so much.